Halloween was never a big deal for me. For some, it's an excuse to dress up, eat candy, or try to scare the neighbors. But for me, it was just a day to stay indoors, watch a few scary movies, and enjoy the peace and quiet once the trick-or-treaters were gone. This Halloween was no different, or so I thought. The night started out like any other. I got home late from work, just in time to catch the last wave of kids running door to door, their laughter echoing through the chilly evening air. I didn't put much effort into decorating, just a simple pumpkin on the porch and a bowl of candy for the kids. I wasn't planning to stay up long, just enough to hand out treats and then settle into my usual routine of watching horror movies and relaxing. By around 9 p.m., the flow of trick-or-treaters had slowed to a trickle, and the streets grew quieter. The occasional group of teenagers passed by, laughing and shouting, probably up to no good, but otherwise the night was winding down. I flipped through channels, not paying much attention to the random horror movie playing on the TV, and scrolled through my phone, mindlessly passing the time. Then, there was a knock at the door. It was subtle at first, 3 soft knocks, barely audible over the noise from the TV. I glanced at the clock, 9:30 p.m. Too late for kids to be out trick-or-treating, I thought, but maybe there were some stragglers or teens playing pranks. I got up, candy bowl in hand, and walked to the door. When I opened it, I wasn't met by a group of giggling kids or bored teens. Instead, a single figure stood on my porch. They were wearing a mask, an unnervingly realistic one. It wasn't like the typical plastic masks kids wore on Halloween. This one was different. The features were too lifelike, too human, except for the blank, expressionless stare frozen on the mask's face. The eyes were hidden deep in shadow, and the skin of the mask was pale, almost translucent, like it was crafted to resemble a real face, but with something subtly wrong about it. Too perfect, too smooth. Trick or treat, the figure said in a low, almost mocking tone. There was no excitement in their voice, no cheer or laughter, just those words hanging in the air like a challenge. I chuckled awkwardly, holding out the bowl of candy. "You're a bit late," I said, trying to break the tension. I expected them to reach for the candy, but they didn't. They just stood there, unmoving, the mask's expression locked onto me like it was watching, studying. After a long, uncomfortable silence, the figure tilted their head slightly, as if analyzing me. Then, without a word, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the night without looking back. I closed the door, an unsettling feeling creeping over me. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about the interaction was wrong. It wasn't just the mask, it was the way they stood there, not moving, not reacting, just watching. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just a weird Halloween prank, but the image of that mask stuck in my mind. Back on the couch, I couldn't focus on the movie anymore. My mind kept replaying the scene at the door, the lifeless eyes hidden in shadow, the eerie silence that followed after they walked away. Something about it didn't sit right with me. Around 11 p.m., I was finally beginning to relax when I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, the knocking was louder, more deliberate. My heart skipped a beat, and I glanced at the clock again, 11:45 p.m. There was no reason for anyone to be knocking at my door this late. No kids, no pranks. This was something else. I approached the door cautiously, not opening it this time. Instead, I peered through the peephole, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The same figure from earlier was standing there. But now, they weren't alone. 2 more figures stood beside them, all wearing the same disturbingly lifelike masks. They were arranged in a straight line, perfectly still, each one with their head slightly tilted, staring at the door through those blank, soulless eyes. I stepped back, my heart racing. This wasn't a prank. This was something far more sinister. I grabbed my phone, trying to call the local police, but the call didn't go through. My signal was gone. I checked the Wi-Fi out, no service. Panic started to set in. I tried the landline, but it was dead too. Nothing was working. For a few moments I just stood there, frozen in place, unsure of what to do. My mind raced with thoughts of what was happening, but none of them made sense. Why were they here? What did they want? Then, the knocking came again, harder this time, more insistent. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my body was trembling. I backed away from the door, moving toward the kitchen. The house felt too quiet, like something was waiting, lurking just out of sight. Every little sound, the creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator felt magnified, like the house itself was holding its breath. The phone in my hand buzzed, and I nearly dropped it. It was a text from an unknown number. Look outside. D. I didn't want to. Every instinct in my body screamed at me not to, but my hands moved on their own, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek out the window. My heart stopped. They were standing in the street now, not just the three from before, but more dozens of them, all wearing those same lifelike masks. They stood in a perfect line, motionless, staring at my house. None of them moved, none of them spoke. They just watched, like they were waiting for something. I stumbled back from the window, my hands shaking. This couldn't be happening. There were too many of them, too organized, too deliberate. This wasn't just a group of kids messing around. This was something far more calculated, something terrifying. The knocking came again, from the back door this time. I spun around, knife in hand now, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I moved cautiously toward the back of the house, checking the lock on the door, making sure it was secure. It was. But the knocking continued, relentless, like they knew I was inside, knew I was listening, waiting. I backed away, retreating to the living room, but as I moved, I heard something else. A faint, almost imperceptible creak from upstairs. Someone or something was inside. I froze, every muscle in my body tense, listening. My house was old, it made noises all the time. But this was different. This was deliberate. It was the sound of someone moving, someone trying to stay quiet. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I couldn't move. I just stood there, gripping the knife, listening to the soft, steady footsteps coming from above. I stood in the dark, trying to control my breathing, trying to make sense of what was happening. The knocking had stopped, but the silence was worse. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air had thickened, pressing in on me from all sides. The voice was soft, barely audible, but it cut through the darkness like a blade. I whipped around, my eyes scanning the room, but I couldn't see anything. Just darkness. Just shadows. The phone buzzed in my hand again. You can't hide. My heart pounded in my chest. I dropped the phone, backing away from it like it was a snake ready to strike. The sound of footsteps upstairs became louder, a steady, deliberate rhythm moving toward the top of the staircase. I could feel the weight of the silence that followed, thick and heavy, pressing down on me. My mind raced, spinning in every direction, trying to figure out what to do. But there was nowhere to go. Nowhere to hide. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where would I run to? The house felt small, claustrophobic, as if the walls were closing in. I forced myself to think. I backed into my bedroom, shutting the door and locking it too. My legs felt like jelly, and my body was drained from the adrenaline coursing through me. I could still hear those words from the text echoing in my mind, "You can't hide." All I could do was wait. Wait for the night to pass. Wait for dawn to break. Wait for this nightmare to end. The minutes felt like hours, each one dragging by slower than the last. My mind was a tangled mess of fear and exhaustion. I kept thinking about those footsteps, about the strange, haunting text. I tried to tell myself it was all just some sick joke, that I'd wake up in the morning and laugh at how stupid I was for being so scared. The air was crisp on Halloween night, a biting chill that wrapped around me like a shroud as I navigated the streets. A harvest moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the neighborhood, and the shadows danced in its light, creating a mesmerizing yet unsettling atmosphere. I had always loved this time of year, the thrill of costumes, candy, and the anticipation of something lurking just beyond the flickering jack-o'-lanterns. The neighborhood was alive with the sounds of laughter and the occasional shriek, children darting from house to house, their costumes a kaleidoscope of color against the darkening sky. As I walked, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement mixed with apprehension. I had met Jason online a few weeks prior, and from our very first conversation, he had charmed me with his wit and humor. Our chats flowed easily, filled with laughter and shared interests. We discussed everything from our favorite horror movies to the best candy to hand out on Halloween. I felt a connection with him that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Each text and phone call drew us closer, making the prospect of meeting him in person exhilarating yet daunting. When he invited me to his Halloween party, I felt a flutter of excitement, but it was tinged with caution. I knew better than to dive in without a lifebuoy, so I took the necessary precautions. I shared my plans with a close friend, texting her the address and the time I'd arrive. Just in case I told her, my fingers tapping nervously on the screen. I wanted to be careful, to make sure that someone knew where I was and who I was with. My friend texted back reassuringly, promising to check in on me later that night. I arrived at Jason's house a little after 8, my heart racing in anticipation. Dressed in a vintage witch costume, complete with a flowing cape and a pointed hat, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. The exterior of his home was unremarkable, an old 2-story structure that could have blended into the backdrop of any horror film. The porch light flickered ominously, casting erratic shadows that seemed to mock my nervousness. I stood at the door, hesitating for a moment, the chill of the night air settling deeper into my bones. My mind raced with thoughts of the evening ahead. What if he wasn't what he seemed? What if the chemistry we had online didn't translate to the real world? Shaking off my doubts, I rang the doorbell, heart thumping in my chest. After a moment, the door creaked open, and there stood Jason, but something was off. He wore a mask, a grotesque, twisted creation with a wide grin and hollow eyes that stared right through me. I hesitated, a surge of instinct telling me to turn and run, but curiosity and the thrill of the night kept my feet planted. "Welcome to my haunted abode," he cackled, his voice muffled through the mask. "Come on in. Everyone else is already inside." I stepped into the dimly lit entryway, the door shutting behind me with a finality that sent shivers down my spine. The air inside felt stale, tinged with something sweet and sickly, like burnt sugar. "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Ah, they're just in the back. You know how wild Halloween parties can get," he replied, gesturing toward a hallway that led deeper into the house. I followed, the creaking floorboards echoing beneath my feet as if the house itself were groaning in protest. As I ventured further inside, I noticed the unsettling details. The walls were lined with odd photographs, some depicting smiling faces while others were distorted, twisted into expressions of pain or horror. A feeling of dread settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside, telling myself it was just the atmosphere of the season. "Let's go to the kitchen," Jason said, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "I made some special treats." He led me through a doorway into a large kitchen, where dim lights flickered overhead. The countertops were adorned with grotesque, half-eaten snacks and unidentifiable dishes, each one more disturbing than the last. A half-melted witch's brew bubbled in a cauldron, and the scent was nauseating. "Looks great," I forced a smile, but my heart raced as the sense of wrongness deepened. "Where are the other guests?" He leaned closer, the mask shifting slightly as he laughed. "They'll be here soon. They always come late to the best parties." A sudden crash echoed from the hallway, making my heart leap into my throat. I turned to look, but when I glanced back, Jason was no longer smiling. His eyes, dark and empty behind the mask, held a predatory gleam. "I think we should play a little game," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. Before I could react, he lunged at me, his hand grasping my wrist with iron strength. Panic surged through me, and I yanked my arm away, stumbling backward. "What the hell?" I shouted, backing away, my mind racing. This was not the friendly guy I'd been talking to. This was something else, something terrifying. "Don't be scared. It's just a little fun," he sneered, removing the mask with a swift motion, revealing a face twisted into a maniacal grin. "Let's see how fast you can run." Without thinking, I turned and sprinted for the door. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in ragged gasps as I dashed down the hallway. The sound of his footsteps echoed behind me, chasing me, taunting me. I reached the front door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the knob. It wouldn't budge. "Where do you think you're going?" he called, his voice cold and mocking. "The party's just getting started." I glanced over my shoulder to see him gaining on me, eyes glinting with manic excitement. In a desperate bid, I darted into a side room, slamming the door behind me. I quickly locked it, my heart racing as I scanned the space. It was a small office cluttered with bizarre artifacts, but I couldn't think about that now. I could hear him on the other side, muttering to himself, sounding both amused and furious. I needed to find another way out. The room had a window, and as I rushed toward it, I could feel the oppressive atmosphere closing in. With trembling hands, I pried open the window and looked down. It was a steep drop, but there was no other choice. I took a deep breath and clambered onto the sill, praying the ground would break my fall. Just as I was about to jump, I heard him burst into the room, a wild look in his eyes. "Going somewhere," he yelled, lunging for me. I leaped, falling hard onto the ground below. Pain shot through my ankle, but I forced myself to ignore it as I scrambled to my feet and ran. The yard was dark, overgrown with weeds and twisted branches that seemed to reach for me. I didn't dare look back, knowing he was close behind. I raced through the darkness, my mind focused on escape. I spotted the streetlight up ahead, the warm glow of safety. I pushed my legs harder, ignoring the searing pain in my ankle, until I finally burst onto the sidewalk. I glanced back, heart pounding, to see Jason standing in the yard, silhouetted against the house, a predatory grin on his face. "Run all you want, but you can't hide," he called, his laughter echoing in the night. I sprinted toward the light, shouting for help, praying someone would hear me. As I reached the safety of the street, a car came around the corner, headlights illuminating the scene. I flagged it down, and the driver pulled over, eyes wide with confusion. "Get in." "Please," I cried, barely able to catch my breath. The driver didn't hesitate, opening the door wide. I jumped in, glancing back to see Jason standing there, watching me with a chilling calmness as the car sped away. My heart raced as I tried to comprehend what had just happened, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. As we drove into the night, I stole one last glance back at the house, its dark silhouette fading into the distance like a ghostly apparition. The oppressive atmosphere that had cloaked it moments before seemed to cling to the shadows, and I could almost feel Jason's twisted grin seared into my memory. The experience was a chilling lesson in trust and caution, a reminder that sometimes the masks people wear can conceal horrors far beyond our imagination. The excitement of costumes and candy had morphed into the fear of the unknown, and the echoes of Jason's maniacal laughter haunted me. I clenched my hands tightly in my lap, feeling the adrenaline still coursing through my veins as I tried to process what had just happened. That night, I learned that while some masks may be playful and fun, others hide darker intentions, and I vowed to never let my guard down again. It was Halloween night, one of those nights where the streets were alive with children and adults alike, decked out in their costumes, the distant sounds of laughter and shouting carrying through the air. I had just finished dinner at a friend's place, and despite the festive atmosphere, I was ready to call it a night. My walk home was a familiar one, a route I had taken countless times. It wasn't too far, maybe 1.5 miles. The streets were littered with glowing jack-o' lanterns and hastily made decorations, flickering in the dim glow of porch lights. The occasional trick-or-treater passed by, but the hour was growing late, and most of the houses had already gone dark. I wasn't in a hurry. In fact, I liked walking alone at night. There was something calming about it, an opportunity to breathe, to let the stress of the day fall away. It was like a reset button. The streets, so full of noise and people during the day, turned into a quiet sanctuary after dark, especially on nights like tonight, when the festive chaos of Halloween had just begun to die down. The neighborhood was finally beginning to settle, the last few costumed kids had made their rounds, and most houses had turned off their porch lights, signaling that trick-or-treating was over. But tonight felt different. There was a sharp bite in the air, colder than usual for this time of year. The usual calm didn't sit right. It wasn't just the cold, there was something else, a kind of pressure in the atmosphere, like the world was holding its breath. I told myself it was just the typical Halloween mood. People get jumpy this time of year. You see shadows where there are none, hear noises that don't exist. It was part of the fun, right? As I walked, the decorations lining the streets became more extravagant. It seemed like every other house had tried to outdo the last. One in particular caught my eye. It was decked out in over-the-top Halloween-geared giant skeletons towered over the lawn. Their hollow eyes glowing in eerie green fog machines pumped out a steady stream of mist, making the whole scene look like a haunted graveyard. Fake tombstones were scattered across the yard with corny messages like R.I.P. Bill's diet and here lies a cat person. There was a speaker playing some scratchy recording of creepy laughter that echoed down the block. I chuckled to myself as I passed. People always go a bit overboard on Halloween. I admired their commitment though. It made the night feel special, more alive. But as my eyes scanned the yard, something else caught my attention. Across the street, standing just at the edge of the sidewalk, was a figure. He, or at least I thought it was a he, was wearing a Halloween mask, one of those cheap plastic ones you can pick up at any store, with exaggerated, cartoonish features and a grotesque, almost too wide grin. His body was draped in a long dark coat that seemed to swallow him whole, giving him an unnaturally tall and lanky appearance. The mask's painted-on smile gleamed under the streetlight, frozen in place, but somehow unsettling. I paused for a moment, trying to figure out if this was part of the house's elaborate decorations. But no, the figure was on the wrong side of the street, far from the lawn display. He was standing completely still, just staring. I couldn't see his eyes through the mask's narrow slits, but it felt like he was looking straight at me. I waved awkwardly, trying to break the tension, though I wasn't sure why I felt any tension at all. After all, it was Halloween. People were out and about wearing all kinds of strange costumes. Whoever this was, they were probably just having a little fun, messing with the stragglers who were still out. I shrugged, chuckled to myself, and kept walking. But after a few steps, I glanced back over my shoulder. The figure was still there. Only now, he was moving. Not quickly, not like he was running to catch up, but with a slow, deliberate pace. Just walking. Each step measured, purposeful. I couldn't hear his footsteps over the sound of my own, but I could feel him, that feeling of being watched, followed. My heart rate picked up a little, though I tried to brush it off, It's Halloween, I told myself again. Probably just some kid or a guy messing around, looking to scare someone before calling it a night. I turned onto my street, hoping that maybe when I reached my house he would peel off, maybe reveal himself as a friend playing a joke. But as I glanced back again, the man in the mask was still there. His silence was unnerving. No whoops, no shouting boo like some neighborhood kid trying to scare me. Just silent, unrelenting following. I picked up my pace, hoping to put some distance between us, but he matched me step for step. Every time I quickened, he quickened too. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, even though I couldn't see his eyes behind that grotesque grin on the mask. By the time I reached my house, my heart was pounding in my chest. I rushed up the steps to the porch, fumbling with my keys as I tried to get the door open. I glanced back again, and there he was still standing there at the end of my driveway, unmoving, the dim streetlight casting long shadows behind him. I practically threw myself into the house, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it with shaky hands. I stood there, back pressed against the door, trying to steady my breathing. I told myself it was just a prank, just some Halloween scare tactic, but it didn't feel like a prank anymore. After a few moments, I slowly made my way to the front window, peeking through the blinds. He was still there, standing at the edge of my driveway, staring at my house. His posture hadn't changed. The mask's grin seemed even more twisted now under the dim light, mocking me, taunting me, taunting me. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? Who was this guy? Part of me wanted to fling the door open and confront him, but another part, the smarter part, kept me rooted in place. Something about him felt wrong. Not just a prank, not just a Halloween stunt. There was something sinister in the way he moved, the way he followed me without a word, without hesitation. I tried to distract myself, pacing around the living room, turning on the TV, anything to drown out the thoughts racing through my head. But every few minutes, I couldn't help but check the window again. And every time, he was still there. He wasn't leaving. Hours passed. It was well past midnight now, and the streets outside were dead silent. Not even a car passed by. I couldn't believe it, he was still standing there, still waiting. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but then I hesitated. What would I say? Some guy in a Halloween mask won't stop standing outside my house. It sounded ridiculous, like something out of a bad horror movie. I decided to wait it out. Surely he would get bored and leave eventually, right? But he didn't. I stayed awake for as long as I could, my eyes flicking between the TV and the window. Every time I checked, he was still there, never moving. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I must have dozed off on the couch. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, and for a moment I wondered if it had all been a dream. I jumped up and ran to the window, pulling back the curtain. He was gone. Gone. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Maybe it had been some stupid prank after all, some creepy Halloween thing that had gotten under my skin. I laughed at myself for overreacting, for letting my imagination run wild. But as I was about to turn away from the window, something caught my eye, something on the porch. My breath hitched in my throat as I slowly opened the front door and stepped outside. Lying there, perfectly placed in the center of my porch, was the mask. The same grotesque mask the man had been wearing all night. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, my mind scrambling for explanations. How could it be here? I hadn't heard him come up to the house. I hadn't heard anything. With trembling hands, I picked it up, my stomach churning. As I turned it over, a piece of paper fluttered to the ground, tucked inside the mask. I bent down to pick it up, unfolding the small scrap of paper. Scrawled in messy, jagged handwriting were 4 words that sent a chill down my spine. "I'll be back tonight." I dropped the mask and the note, stumbling backward into the house, slamming the door shut behind me once more. This time, I didn't just lock it, I bolted it, barricaded it, and double-checked every window and door in the house. I sat there in the silence, heart pounding, knowing that night would come again soon, and that he would be waiting. But this time, I had no idea what would happen next. Halloween had never been my favorite time of year. I didn't hate it, but something about the night just felt off. Sure, I'd dress up as a kid, join in the trick or treating with friends, but as I grew older, the novelty faded. I didn't get the thrill of pretending to be something else, of immersing yourself in the macabre for a night. The costumes, the masks, the cheap scares, it wasn't my thing. So when I got an unexpected call a few days before Halloween, inviting me to a party, I was hesitant. The call came from Tom, an old acquaintance from college I hadn't heard from in years. We were never particularly close, but I remembered him as a decent enough guy. He explained that he was throwing a small get-together at his new place in Old Mansion, he claimed, on the outskirts of town. He had bought it recently and had been restoring it ever since. "Come on, man. It's going to be a blast. Just a few of us, nothing crazy. I promise you'll have a good time," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. I almost said no, but after thinking about it, I figured, why not? My life had been pretty monotonous lately, and it might be nice to get out for a night, have a few drinks, catch up with some old friends. Plus, how often do you get invited to a party in a mansion? The night of the party, I drove out to the address Tom had given me. It was further than I expected, well outside the city limits. The roads were dark, winding, the kind of place where streetlights were sparse, and you couldn't see more than a few feet in front of you without your headlights. The trees were thick on either side of the road, their twisted branches looming overhead like skeletal fingers. Finally, I pulled up to the mansion. Even in the dim light of my car's headlights, I could tell it was old, really old. It towered over the grounds, its cracked stone walls covered in vines and ivy, windows tall and narrow, many of them broken or boarded up. The place had clearly seen better days. I parked the car and got out, feeling a strange chill in the air. The house had a presence about it, like it was watching me. A shiver ran down my spine, but I shook it off. It was just an old house, nothing more. The driveway was long and winding, and as I approached the front steps, I noticed something strange. No sound. No music, no voices, no sign of the party I had been expecting. I checked my phone to make sure I had the right time and place. Sure enough, Tom had texted me earlier, 9 p.m. at the mansion. Don't be late. It was just after 9, and yet nothing. The house loomed in front of me, its dark windows like eyes staring blankly into the night. I knocked on the front door, half expecting it to swing open on its own like something out of a horror movie. But nothing happened. As I knocked again, harder this time. The sound echoed off the old wooden door, but still no response. Then, just as I was about to give up and head back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. "Hey man, sorry, we're all inside. Doors open. Just come on in." I pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly in protest. Inside, the house was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and the smell of something old, decaying. The place looked even more run down on the inside. The wallpaper was peeling, and the floors were covered in a thick layer of grime. Sheets covered most of the furniture, giving the place an eerie, abandoned feel. "Tom," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty hallways. No answer. I walked further inside, my footsteps loud on the creaky wooden floors. I reached what looked like the living room. A large chandelier hung from the ceiling, though many of its bulbs had burned out, leaving the room bathed in a faint, sickly yellow glow. The furniture, covered in white sheets, looked like ghosts sitting in a circle around the cold, unused fireplace. There was something unsettling about the scene, like I had walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. I took out my phone and texted Tom again. "Where are you guys? This place is creepy as hell." A few moments later, my phone buzzed with a reply. "We're upstairs. Just come up to the second floor. Last room on the right. Upstairs." I glanced toward the staircase at the far end of the room. It spiraled upward into darkness, the old wooden steps looking like they could collapse at any moment. I didn't want to go up there. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave, to get out of that house. But I had already come this far. It was just a party. Tom and the others were probably setting up some elaborate Halloween prank. I'd walk upstairs. They'd jump out in their costumes, and we'd all have a laugh about it over drinks. At least, that's what I told myself. I made my way to the staircase, each step groaning loudly under my weight. The air grew colder as I ascended, and the darkness seemed to thicken around me. By the time I reached the top, I could barely see a few feet in front of me. The dim glow illuminating the narrow hallway that stretched out before me. Old portraits lined the walls, faded, grim-looking figures staring down with eyes that seemed to follow me as I walked past. The floor creaked with every step, the sound echoing unnervingly in the empty space. I stopped in front of the last door on the right. It was slightly ajar, and from the other side I could hear a faint, almost imperceptible sound of slow, rhythmic creaking, like something rocking back and forth. My hand hovered over the doorknob, a knot tightening in my stomach. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty. Well, almost empty. In the far corner, bathed in the faint light from the hallway, sat an old rocking chair. It swayed gently back and forth, creaking with each movement, though there was no one in it. The air in the room was thick, heavy, and I felt a deep sense of dread wash over me. Suddenly, the door behind me slammed shut with a deafening bang. I spun around, heart racing, and grabbed the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. My phone buzzed in my hand. I glanced down at the screen, half expecting another text from Tom. But this time, the message was different. "You shouldn't have come." My blood ran cold. I tried the doorknob again, harder this time, but it still wouldn't move. Panic surged through me, and I began pounding on the door, shouting for help. "Tom. Anyone. Let me out." There was no response. Just the soft creaking of the rocking chair behind me. I turned around slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The chair had stopped moving. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I backed away from the door, my phone's weak light barely cutting through the darkness. My mind was racing. Was this all part of the prank? Was Tom messing with me? But why would he lock me in here? My phone buzzed again. It's too late. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The shuffling outside the door grew louder, closer. My mind was screaming at me to do something, anything, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead. Suddenly, the door burst open. I didn't stop to see what or who had opened it. I bolted from the room, sprinting down the hallway, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear footsteps behind me now, faster, heavier, pounding against the floor as they chased me. I reached the staircase and practically flew down the steps, nearly tripping over my own feet in my desperation to escape. The house felt alive, like it was closing in on me, suffocating me. I didn't stop running until I reached the front door. I yanked it open and stumbled outside, gasping for air. The cold night air hit my face, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But something made me glance back at the house one last time. There, in the second-story window, stood a figure. A dark silhouette, watching me. Its face was hidden in the shadows, but I could feel its eyes on me. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I ran to my car, jumped in, and sped away, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. It wasn't until I was miles away, back in the safety of my own apartment, that I dared to check my phone again. The conversation with Tom was gone, every message, every text erased. I called a mutual friend the next day, still shaken by what had happened. "Tom, you're talking about Tom Green?" my friend asked, confused. "He moved to Europe months ago. He's been gone for a while." I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. Whoever or whatever had invited me to that house, it hadn't been Tom. And whatever it was, it had been watching me. I remember that Halloween night vividly. It was the first time I felt truly afraid. I wasn't a little kid anymore. I was 15, almost 16. At that age, you're supposed to be too old for trick-or-treating, but young enough to enjoy the thrill of a good scare. I thought I was done being scared by monsters and ghosts. But that night, something changed. It started like any other Halloween. The streets were alive with kids dressed as ghouls, witches, and superheroes. Pumpkins flickered on porches, casting faint shadows across lawns. The air smelled of leaves and cold, and the occasional blast of cold wind made the night feel sharper. But I wasn't out there with the other kids, not this time. I was home, waiting for my parents to come back from some Halloween party. They had left me alone, trusting me to watch the house. After all, I was practically an adult, right? I sat on the couch, flipping through channels. The house was quiet, except for the occasional muffled laughter of trick-or-treaters from outside. The wind howled now and then, rattling the windows, but I told myself it was just a typical October night. Still, there was an unease in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It started when I got home from school. Every time I looked out the window, it seemed like something or someone was just out of sight. But when I turned to look directly, there was nothing. I chalked it up to Halloween jitters. Everyone gets paranoid on a night like this. At around 9 p.m., the trick-or-treaters thinned out. The street got quieter. I could hear the leaves rustling outside, the faint hum of streetlights buzzing in the distance. The house seemed to settle into the silence, and I felt strangely uneasy about it. I hadn't heard a knock on the door for a while, and the silence felt oppressive, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Then, around 10 p.m., it happened. I was sitting on the couch when I noticed a shadow in the hallway. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. The hallway was dark, lit only by the glow of the TV, and shadows tend to play tricks on your mind. But this wasn't like the usual flicker of light and dark. The shadow was tall, human-like, standing at the end of the hall, just outside my bedroom door. I froze, staring at it, trying to figure out if my eyes were messing with me. But no matter how hard I blinked, it didn't disappear. The shadow didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, like it was watching me. My heart started pounding. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light maybe. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I couldn't bring myself to look away. It felt like if I blinked, it would move closer. My body was stiff, every muscle tense. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coat hanging on the wall, or a shadow from the tree outside. But no, there was no tree that could cast a shadow like that inside the house. And the coat rack wasn't even near my room. I swallowed hard and stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I forced myself to move. I had to prove to myself that it was nothing. I approached the hallway, slowly, my eyes never leaving the shadow. As I got closer, I realized something was wrong. The shadow wasn't cast on the wall. It was standing in the middle of the hallway, solid and dark, like a person. But it wasn't a person. It couldn't be. I stopped a few feet away, my heart racing, and then, without warning, the shadow shifted. Not much, just a small, subtle movement. Like it was leaning forward, waiting for something. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. The shadow didn't move again. It just stood there, silent and still. My stomach twisted in knots. I didn't know what to do. My phone was on the couch, too far away to grab without taking my eyes off the shadow. But I couldn't just stand there forever. I had to do something. I took a step back, then another. The shadow didn't follow me, but it didn't fade either. It just stood there, waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted for the front door, my heart hammering in my chest. I yanked it open and stumbled outside, breathing hard. The street was empty. The laughter and footsteps of trick-or-treaters had vanished. The wind had died down and everything was eerily still. I stood on the porch trying to catch my breath, but the silence was almost worse than the shadow. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stay outside forever, but going back inside felt like a death sentence. After what felt like hours, I finally worked up the courage to go back in. I couldn't just leave the house. My parents would be home soon, and I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. Maybe I was just seeing things. Maybe I was overreacting. I stepped back inside and closed the door, my eyes immediately darting to the hallway. The shadow was gone. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last long. Something was still off. The air in the house felt heavier, colder. I could feel it pressing down on me, suffocating me. I went back to the couch and grabbed my phone. I was going to call my parents, tell them to come home. But as soon as I unlocked my phone, the screen went black. I tried turning it on again, but nothing happened. It was dead. No warning, no low battery, just dead. That's when I heard it. A soft creaking noise coming from the hallway. My heart skipped a beat. I turned slowly, my body trembling, and there it was again. The shadow. But this time, it was closer. Standing right at the edge of the living room, barely a few feet away from me. I backed up, my body shaking uncontrollably. I didn't know what to do. The shadow didn't move, but I could feel it watching me, waiting. My mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation, but there wasn't one. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a trick of the light. And then, without any warning, the shadow shifted again. Slowly, deliberately, it moved toward me. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled back, tripping over the coffee table and crashing to the floor. I scrambled to get up, my heart pounding in my chest, but the shadow kept coming. Closer. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as the shadow loomed over me, dark and cold, like it was going to swallow me whole. And then, just as it was about to reach me, it stopped. For a moment, everything was still, silent. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The shadow lingered for a few agonizing seconds, and then, slowly, it began to fade. Bit by bit, it dissolved into the darkness, until there was nothing left. I sat there, trembling, my body drenched in sweat. Every inch of me felt paralyzed, my muscles locked in a state of terror. I didn't dare move for what felt like hours, too terrified that the shadow would reappear, that it would come back and finish whatever it had started. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and my skin was cold, clammy. The silence around me became a heavy blanket, smothering me. I strained my ears for any sound, any hint that the shadow might still be there, lurking just beyond my sight. But there was nothing. Just the faint creak of the house settling, and the distant wind whispering through the trees outside. When my parents finally came home later that night, I was still sitting there, staring at the hallway where the shadow had been. I heard their car pull into the driveway, their keys jangling as they unlocked the door. Relief washed over me, but I couldn't shake the lingering dread. They came in, laughing and talking about their party, completely oblivious to what had happened. I wanted to tell them, to spill everything right then and there. But how could I? How could I explain that I'd been paralyzed by fear, that a shadow had nearly suffocated me with its presence? They'd think I was crazy. They'd brush it off as a Halloween scare, a trick of the light. or my imagination running wild after watching too many horror movies. So I stayed quiet. I kept it all to myself. My parents asked if I was okay, and I just nodded, forcing a weak smile. I told them everything was fine, that I had a headache and was just tired. They believed me, of course. Why wouldn't they? But I knew the truth. And even now, all these years later, I can still feel it. Every Halloween, when the air turns cold and the night grows thick with shadows, I can feel that presence again, watching me, waiting. I don't see it anymore, not like I did that night, but I know it's there. I've never been the kind of person to scare easily. I pride myself on being logical and practical. Fear wasn't something I thought about much, not until that Halloween night. The air was crisp and electric with the thrill of the season, the scent of damp leaves mingling with the faint whiff of pumpkin spice wafting through the neighborhood. I had just finished dinner, a simple pasta dish that I barely remembered tasting, and settled down in front of the TV. I flipped through the channels aimlessly, eventually landing on a crime documentary. It was one of those shows where the narrator's calm voice tells you horrifying stories, making them sound mundane, like reading the news. This one was about home invasions. I wasn't paying much attention at first, but then something caught my ear, a description of how easily burglars slip into homes unnoticed, how they bypass locks, enter through windows, and terrorize unsuspecting families. There were stories of people waking up to find strangers in their bedrooms or discovering that someone had been living in their attic for days without them knowing. I shook my head and laughed. That would never happen to me. I always double-checked my doors before bed, made sure the windows were locked, and had motion sensor lights outside. My house was a fortress, or at least it felt like one. The show ended, and I switched off the TV, feeling a little smug in my security routine as I locked the front door. It was late, probably around midnight, and I wasn't particularly tired, but I headed to bed anyway. I figured I could scroll through my phone for a bit until I drifted off to sleep. After brushing my teeth, I climbed into bed, turning off the bedside lamp. The room sank into darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the streetlights outside, filtering through the curtains. I lay there for a while, my mind wandering over the usual thoughts: work, bills, mundane things. But then I heard something. A soft, almost imperceptible thump. I froze. It was faint, but it was there. At first, I thought it might have been the house settling. Old houses make noises, creaks and groans that you eventually get used to. But this was different. It wasn't the usual creaking of floorboards or the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. This was deliberate, like a footstep. My ears strained in the silence, trying to catch any sound. For a moment, there was nothing, just the heavy stillness of the night. I let out a slow breath, telling myself I was being paranoid. Then it happened again, a thud, closer this time. My heart began to race, my body instinctively tensing. I wasn't alone. I sat up slowly, every nerve in my body on edge. The room was dark, the shadows thick and heavy. My phone was on the nightstand, and I reached for it, but my hand hesitated. What was I going to do? Call the police and tell them I heard a noise? It could be nothing. But the sound came again, and this time it was unmistakable. A slow, deliberate footstep, just outside my bedroom door. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. My house wasn't big. There was no way anyone could be inside without me noticing, unless they had been in here before I went to bed. My mind raced, running through every possible scenario. Maybe someone had slipped in while I was distracted. Maybe they had been waiting, watching me all night. I forced myself to move, creeping out of bed as quietly as I could. My bare feet touched the cold hardwood floor, and I tiptoed across the room, pressing my ear to the door. There it was, breathing, soft, shallow, and deliberate. My own breath caught in my throat. Someone was on the other side of the door. I backed away, heart pounding. My hand clutched my phone so tightly my knuckles ached as I dialed 911. The operator answered quickly, but I kept my voice low, whispering into the phone as I explained the situation. "There's someone in my house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're outside my bedroom door." The operator's calm voice was almost surreal. "Stay where you are, sir. Officers are on their way." I glanced at the door. "How long?" "Just a few minutes," she replied. I didn't have a few minutes. The door handle began to turn. I stared, my blood running cold as the knob rotated slowly, silently. The door creaked open, just a sliver at first, but it was enough to make my breath catch in my throat. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, tall and still, almost blending into the darkness. I couldn't make out his face, but the glint of metal in his hand told me all I needed to know. A knife. I couldn't move. My mind screamed at me to do something, run, hide, fight, but I was frozen. The figure just stood there, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in rhythm. He didn't rush me. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, waiting, like he was savoring the moment. I finally found my voice. What? The figure tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question, but didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step forward. That was enough to snap me out of my paralysis. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp from the nightstand, and hurled it at him. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing I could think of. The lamp hit him square in the chest with a dull thud, and he staggered back, but he didn't fall. Then, he laughed. A low, raspy chuckle that sent a wave of terror through me. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I bolted out of the bedroom, sprinting down the hallway toward the front door. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps, slow, deliberate, and unhurried, like he knew I couldn't escape. My hands fumbled with the lock, my fingers trembling as I tried to get the door open. I could feel him getting closer. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Finally, the lock clicked, and I flung the door open, practically throwing myself outside into the cold night air. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. My feet pounded the pavement as I ran down the street, not stopping until I saw the flashing lights of a police car in the distance. Relief washed over me as the car pulled up, and 2 officers jumped out, their guns drawn. I pointed frantically toward the house, my chest heaving as I tried to explain what had happened. "He's inside," I gasped. "He's in the house." The officers didn't hesitate. They rushed inside while I stood there, shaking, trying to catch my breath. Every nerve in my body was still on high alert, and the cold night air felt sharp against my skin, but I couldn't think straight. My mind was stuck on the image of that man, his grin, the malicious glint in his eyes. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I was frozen in that moment, replaying it over and over, wondering how close I had come to real danger. Minutes passed. I paced in the yard, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My heart was still racing, but the initial surge of adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me cold and shaky. I rubbed my arms, glancing at the officers as they moved from room to room inside my house, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. I half expected to hear shouts, or the clattering sound of someone being caught, but nothing came, only silence. Finally, the front door creaked open, and one of the officers stepped out, his expression tight. He looked at me, then at his partner, as if he didn't quite know how to break the news. "There's no one in there," he said slowly, shaking his head. "We searched the whole house. It's empty." I blinked, my brain refusing to comprehend his words. What I stammered. "No, that's impossible. I saw him. He was in my kitchen. He chased me. I saw him." The officers exchanged glances, clearly thinking I was hysterical. The look in their eyes said it all. They didn't believe me. but I knew what I saw. That man had been inside my house. I could still feel his presence, like a lingering poison in the air. I stood frozen in my room, paralyzed by fear as slow, deliberate footsteps echoed in the hallway outside my door, confirming my worst nightmare. He was still here, lurking in the shadows, taunting me with his presence. My heart raced as I reached for my phone, desperate to call for help, but before I could dial, the door creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness. The air felt electric, charged with impending danger, and I was acutely aware that I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted.
I am 30 years old and I shared my house with my sister. It's a 2-floor house, a mother-daughter house, meaning it has 2 kitchens. My sister takes the downstairs. I take the upstairs. My sister isn't home a lot, because she often stays with her boyfriend who lives 20 miles away. Like I said, I'm 30. I shouldn't let being home alone ever freak me out. But admittedly, sometimes it does. This happened on a night that I was home alone in my living room watching a scary movie. My part of the house is an open layout, so the living room, dining room, and kitchen are all one big space. My couch is in the middle of the space. So as I watch TV on the couch, my back is to a large part of the room behind me. So for those a little more easily spooked, it wouldn't be the most comfortable place to be sitting alone watching a scary movie. I'll admit, as I watched in the dark room with nothing but the light from the TV to cancel the darkness of the room, I found myself glancing over my shoulder a lot. I like to think I'm not the only 30-year-old male that does that. But anyway, after the movie, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights in the house, then went to sleep. My sleep lasted for about 2 hours. I woke up around 1 a.m., and I wasn't sure why I woke up at first. Then I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like my sister. It sounded like she was inside the house, so it's not like she was calling for me to open the door. But still, I knew it was my sister's voice. I didn't know what she was yelling up to me though, but I was still groggy and not thinking straight. All I could think was that she must have been calling for me or arguing with her boyfriend, so I got out of bed and went into the pitch-black hall. I turned on the hallway lights and then made my way through the living room and heard my sister's voice again from downstairs. Now I could understand her to be saying my name. I made my way downstairs in the dark, yelling back at her, "What is it?" I looked for the light switch in the foyer downstairs, but couldn't find it. I'm not lying when I say I was groggy as hell. I walked down her little hallway towards her kitchen, find a light switch and flick it on the light in the kitchen. Lights up her little apartment, including her living room. The light starts off dim and needs time to brighten up, but I still saw that there was no one down there. Not her boyfriend. I went to her bedroom, but it was empty. I called her name really loudly one time. No one called back. But shortly after I yelled, I heard something drop to the floor in my sister's bedroom, which I had just checked, and it was empty. I went back up the stairs like a little kid, and went back to my bed to where my phone was. I tried to call her a few times, but she didn't pick up. I had myself locked in my room, wondering if I had just hallucinated all of that. Eventually, I fell asleep, and in the morning, I woke up to text from my sister asking why I called her at 1 a.m. I asked her if she was home last night, and she told me no. She was currently staying at her boyfriend's house. I went downstairs to her bedroom to see what may have fallen down on the floor, but there was not a single object on the floor that could have made that noise. I'm led to believe I hallucinated everything I heard that night, but that's what I want to believe because the alternative would be much more horrific. But I've never really hallucinated anything else or had any kind of sleep disorder, so how vividly I heard my sister's voice and that sound in her room really freaks me out. I was left home alone a lot as a kid, just due to the fact that my mom was single for a good chunk of my upbringing, and she worked as an RN on a crappy RN schedule, and my brother went away to college. This was a night that my mom was working in overnight. It was a weekend night, so I had this girl Molly over who I was talking to, and she hung out for a while. We watched a couple movies and whatnot, and eventually she had to go home because her parents don't like her out late, so I was left alone to hold down the fort. I continued to watch TV in my room in bed. My bedroom is upstairs next to the backyard, so when someone dragged one of the chairs on the deck outside, I heard it. I got up and looked out the window and I saw someone sitting on one of the deck chairs down below. I called Molly's name, thinking it was her. After all, she'd only left under 10 minutes ago. Whoever it was looked up at me, but it wasn't Molly. I immediately pulled away from the window to hide. That was not anybody I recognized, not in the darkness at least. I texted a few close friends on our group chat. If it was one of them messing with me, the ones who answered all said no and asked what I was talking about. I didn't really believe any of my friends would come to my house to mess with me like that anyway. Scared shitless, but still curious. Slowly walked back over to the window to look down again, and that person was still sitting in the chair looking up at my window. It was a he, that much was clear, and he definitely saw me. I hurried away from the window again to turn off the TV. I sat in my bed in a ball, basically, with my arms wrapped around my knees. I waited in darkness for a while. I didn't even want to turn my phone screen on because I was scared he'd see the light. I didn't even want to move because the window was opened and I feared that he'd hear any movement I made. I wanted him to assume I was just no longer in the bedroom. I waited enough time. It had to be a solid 5 minutes of just sitting there. I highly doubted that man outside could still be there. I finally mustered up the courage to get up and look out the window. I felt a little part of me die inside when I saw he was still down there looking up at my window instead of running away from the window again. I tried to be brave and said down to him, "What do you want?" I then noticed his shoulders started to go up and down as if you were laughing really hard. But he didn't make any kind of audible laughing sounds at first, so I heard a slight whistling sound coming from him. It seemed like he was laughing so hard that he was wheezing. I asked him to please go away, then walked away from the window again. I went back to my bed. I was scared to call the police for some reason. I left my room and sat at the top of the stairway, listening. The back door was being pushed. He was trying to get into the house. I ran back to my room to hide again. I was 14. I didn't know what else to do. Eventually, I heard the front door's door not being fiddled with, and the man trying to push the front door open as well. He gave up quickly. Thank God. I closed my bedroom window and curtains. If our doors weren't locked, I could have been killed easily. I was skinny and weak when I was 14, and definitely not a fighter. I didn't leave my room again that night until my mom got home around 9. I told her what happened, and her reaction was angry at me for not calling 911. And in hindsight, that was very stupid of me. One of the many things I did, or rather didn't do at a young age, that I questioned greatly. This was the story of how I almost died as a young kid home alone, and possibly the most intense night of my life with way too much going on. We're a family of 5. I was 10 at the time. My older brother was 14. My little sister was 5. It was a Friday night. My brother was out with his friends causing trouble, clearly, because a dreaded phone call came to my parents. All I remember was, I was in my room playing a Star Wars video game. When I heard my mom start freaking out crying, I got really scared and hurried to see what was wrong. My mom was on the phone with a hospital calling to inform my parents that my brother had gotten hit by a car. Obviously, we were all shaken and really scared. My brother's leg was broken, but I don't know what else was said on the phone. All I know is my parents hurried to get their coats on and got my little sister from her room and asked me if I was okay to stay home alone. I said yes, and they hurried out to the car and left. I was of course really worried for my brother, but I really didn't want to go to the hospital and see him in any kind of bad condition. I don't think my parents wanted me or my sister to either, but they didn't want to leave my 5-year-old sister home without them. It's worth mentioning my brother recovered just fine, as his injury is no longer relevant to the story, other than it being the reason why I was left home alone on a Friday night before my dad left. He was trying to calm down my mom, telling her he was going to be okay. So seeing my dad like that made me feel better. I had a feeling my mom was just being overdramatic, like any mom would be. I continued playing the Star Wars game for a couple more hours when I heard the front door open. I had my bedroom door closed. By this point, it was easily past midnight and past my bedtime. So I turned off the TV and PlayStation and crawled into my bed with my Game Boy. I tried listening to hear my parents' voices, maybe hear if my brother was with them, or just hear what they were saying. But I didn't hear anything. After a few minutes of not hearing them even come up the stairs, I had a feeling something was wrong. I went to my door and quietly opened it, then walked over to the ledge and banister that overlooked the living room. The lights were off, but there were 3 tall people standing in my living room. They weren't my family. I was so petrified that I was frozen for a second before I could quietly walk back into my room and shut the door as quietly as I could in my trepidation. But it wasn't quiet enough, and I knew it. They had to have heard the door click shut, even if just. Slightly, I hurried to my closet door, opened it quietly, stepped inside, then shut the door. I had myself sitting behind a bunch of the boxes and bags of clothes that were stuffed in my closet. I was actually pretty covered from view. There was a short period that felt like forever that I was anticipating my bedroom door open, and it did. And at that moment, I knew I was going to die. I heard footsteps walk into the room. I couldn't tell how many people. It may have been 1, it may have been 2. I heard the footsteps move to my bed, and I heard my covers being played with, then silence. That more footsteps towards the closet door, then silence for a few seconds, and then the closet door opened. My heart was in my throat by this point. All I did was sit quietly and hold my breath. The door was open for a really long time, but I didn't look up. I didn't move. It had to be a good 20 seconds of silence before the door closed again. Footsteps walked away from the door, then out of the room. I finally looked up, and I just realized from where I was, crouched down behind the bags and boxes, I may have been visible to that person. It wasn't until probably an hour that I heard my parents return. I ran downstairs to them. The front door was left ajar by the people who broke in, and they had stolen a number of valuables from our house. It was a night that just went from bad to worst for our family. My parents were in such a rush when they left for the hospital that they apparently didn't even lock the door. I was lucky to have not been killed, that were kidnapped. I look back now and really wonder if the person who opened the closet and just stood there for 20 seconds saw me hiding in there. Maybe he was just a guy that came to rob a house, not to kidnap or hurt a child. Or maybe he just didn't see me, and I just narrowly escaped death or injury. I was home alone for an entire week one time when I was still a teenager, living with my parents, which was a rare occasion since my parents don't go out a lot. My mom's rich friend Patty invited my parents on a trip that she was paying for. I'm an only child, so I was left alone in the house. We lived in Newark, Ohio, which is in Licking County. Yes, our county was actually called Licking County. My parents' old house had woods in the backyard and was on some quiet road that only a few cars would pass per day. Usually we had a huge deck in the backyard overlooking the woods and a decently large backyard. We even had a little fish pond and above-ground swimming pool. This was on a Thursday night, I remember, because I had conversations with friends about plants for the weekend that day. This was in July of 2013. I was out on the deck smoking weed with my speaker playing music. That's about the time it started. I thought I heard a voice from out in the woods. I lowered the music and listened for a little bit. It didn't repeat, so I raised it back up when the music was loud again. I heard a voice from out in the woods again. This time I turned the music off completely and listened for longer. There was a voice calling from the woods again, confirming I wasn't just hearing things. Male's voice saying, "Hey, over here." He was kind of distant, but not too far. The woods were anywhere from 20 to 30 yards away from the deck, and that's where the voice was coming from. I didn't think in a million years it was someone calling out for me, though, rather maybe just some kids playing manhunt or something. The voice called out again, "Hey, over here, we need help this time." I realized the voice was too deep to be a kid, and when a voice yells out, "We need help," obviously that'll always be slightly concerning. I was getting a little bit uncomfortable now because now I was questioning if these yells were directed at me. Now I heard the voice yell, "Straight in front of you, please come help us." And the voice was coming from straight in front of me in the woods. Now I had a feeling this was directed at me. I reluctantly called back, "Who is that?" And they responded, "We just need help, we're stuck in the woods." I called back, What does that mean then? The voice replied back, just please come. Help straight in front of you. I got out from my seat, walked down the steps of the deck onto the grass and proceeded towards the woods. I called out, I'm coming, where are you? The voice replied instantly, right in front of you. I see you, I replied back. Wait, are you alone? Or with someone? There was no answer. This time I stopped in my tracks about halfway towards the woods. I had a bad feeling in my gut about this. I started walking backwards, back towards the house and the deck. I didn't even want to turn my back to the woods because it took me that long to realize there was something very suspicious about this situation. I made it back to the deck and the voice didn't say anything else. If they truly saw me in this was real, they would have said something like, where are you going? At the very least, they knew I was onto the situation. But who even knows how many people were in there? Could have been 1, could have been 3. All I know is getting stuck in the woods makes absolutely no sense. Especially if he or they were able to literally see me, like, what did their shirt get caught on a branch? I went inside the house and locked all the doors just to be safe. I chilled in my living room for a bit, still high. And I think that's why I was more trusting at first, because of how high and relaxed I was then, though I heard the voice again from outside, closer now, definitely in the backyard and not the woods anymore. I heard splashing of water. It could have been the pool or the pond. I hurried to the window to see. I didn't see anyone at first, but then the voice called, I see you, with a laugh. I noticed him. It was one guy. At least one guy visible. He was hidden behind the pool on the other side, and I could only see his head. It was just too dark to make out anything besides this dark medium-length hair. I closed the blinds and tried to ignore it. Maybe he'd lose interest if he saw I wasn't entertaining him. He was probably a sick, deranged person who enjoyed messing with people, so I didn't want to give him what he wanted. But my breaking point was when there was a horrible aggressive banging on the window where I had just closed the blinds, and on the other side, the guy was screaming, help! I screamed at the top of my lungs to off you. Freak, the police are coming. I screamed it over and over, trying to make myself sound crazier than him. I heard him start to laugh on the other side of the glass. His laughing started to fade away as I assume he walked away. I sat back down on the couch, trembling, shaking out of breath. I sat there for a while and it seemed like the guy had really given up. I still got a good night's sleep that night because weed helps me sleep. I wonder if I would have handled that situation any differently if I wasn't high, though. The situation made me more paranoid about who I opened my door to. I'm 23 years old and I live at home with my parents still. One day, they were both not home, and I was outside playing basketball in the front yard. At some point while I was playing, I looked up at one of our upstairs windows and saw a woman standing there. Not my mom, not my sister. He was a random woman, I guess. When she saw me looking at her, she dipped away from the window when I went inside and upstairs to check the lounge room. She wasn't anywhere. I checked every single room I could, every bedroom, the bathroom, every closet. Then I checked the downstairs, which included the living room, kitchen, dining room, one bedroom, and more closets. Finally, I checked the basement, and I highly doubted she could be down there. It's a small basement with a couple couches, a bar, and 2 closets. There weren't many places for someone to hide, but when I opened the second closet door, I was incredibly scared, as I didn't know of any other places someone could be hiding in the house. This was the last unchecked spot that I could think of. I yanked the door open as if I were ripping off a Band-Aid, and like I did with the closet before this one, I right away pushed myself into the closet just in case that woman was in there, and I'd have the jump on her. But all I pushed myself into was a bunch of coats and coat hangers. I was so confused I wasn't going to question my sanity, though I definitely saw that woman, and I knew it. It wasn't the kind of thing you would just so vividly imagine. I went back to the middle floor and screamed very loud that whoever was in the house needs to get the F out. I actually screamed so loud that our next-door neighbor came over and asked if I was okay. I told him that I literally just saw a woman at her upstairs window watching me play basketball. He came in and helped me search again when we couldn't find her. I was left to assume that she snuck out through the back door, which I did unlock after all. When I went to grab the basketball from the yard so my neighbor left, I locked all the doors, called my parents, and told them the crazy story, and they weren't too thrilled, but they asked me to make sure nothing was stolen. I did just that, and luckily it seemed anything that was worth something was still in place. So now fast forward to that night I went to sleep after checking the house one more time, just for peace of mind. It was hard to fall asleep, though my mind was racing for obvious reasons. Most people can't relate to seeing a stranger at their window inside of their house. But my restlessness helped me out in this situation, and here's why I was finally starting to drift away slightly. Then I heard some noises from the other side of me. I had the fan on above me, so the room wasn't dead silence, and that's why I didn't immediately turn to my other side at the first sound I heard. But the sound started as sounds human-like. I turned to my other side, and there she was, getting out from under my bed. She stood up tall above the bed, and I screamed so loud, louder than earlier, before I jumped out of my bed and tackled her to the floor and had my hand around her throat, asking her who she was. My doorbell rang. My neighbor again. I picked a tall, dirty-looking woman up off the floor and dragged her to the front door with me as she struggled and scratched at me. I still have 2 scars on my right arm from her claws. I opened my front door to my neighbor again, and he let himself in and helped me restrain the woman. This was when I called the police. The whole time we waited for the police, the woman was screaming and cursing at my neighbor, and I threatening us too, the best way to put it. She looked and acted like a meth head currently suffering from withdrawals when the police arrived. One of the officers knew exactly who the woman was. They had dealt with her multiple times before. Her name was conveniently Karen. It was satisfying to watch her be brought into the back of the police car. I let my neighbor know how grateful I was for him coming so quickly to help, and that night my mind continued to race. But instead of being completely freaked out, which I still was a little, I felt this overwhelming feeling of satisfaction, and I can't fully explain why.
I've never been the kind of person to scare easily. My friends always joked that I was the one who'd keep a level head in a crisis, the guy who would take charge and calm everyone down. I pride myself on being logical, practical. Fear wasn't something I thought about much, not until that night. It started like any other night in my quiet, comfortable house. I had just finished dinner, a simple pasta dish that I barely remembered tasting, and settled down in front of the TV. I flipped through the channels aimlessly, eventually landing on a crime documentary. It was one of those shows where the narrator's calm voice tells you horrifying stories, making them sound mundane, like reading the news. This one was about home invasions. I wasn't paying much attention at first, but then something caught my ear, a description of how easily burglars slip into homes unnoticed, how they bypass locks, enter through windows, and terrorize unsuspecting families. There were stories of people waking up to find strangers in their bedrooms or discovering that someone had been living in their attic for days without them knowing. I shook my head and laughed. That would never happen to me. I always double-checked my doors before bed, made sure the windows were locked, and had motion sensor lights outside. My house was a fortress, or at least it felt like one. The show ended, and I switched off the TV, feeling a little smug in my security routine as I locked the front door. It was late, probably around midnight, and I wasn't particularly tired, but I headed to bed anyway. I figured I could scroll through my phone for a bit until I drifted off to sleep. After brushing my teeth, I climbed into bed, turning off the bedside lamp. The room sank into darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the streetlights outside, filtering through the curtains. I lay there for a while, my mind wandering over the usual thoughts: work, bills, mundane things. But then I heard something. A soft, almost imperceptible thump. I froze. It was faint, but it was there. At first, I thought it might have been the house settling. Old houses make noises, creaks and groans that you eventually get used to. But this was different. It wasn't the usual creaking of floorboards or the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. This was deliberate, like a footstep. My ears strained in the silence, trying to catch any sound. For a moment, there was nothing, just the heavy stillness of the night. I let out a slow breath, telling myself I was being paranoid. Then it happened again, a thud, closer this time. My heart began to race, my body instinctively tensing. I wasn't alone. I sat up slowly, every nerve in my body on edge. The room was dark, the shadows thick and heavy. My phone was on the nightstand, and I reached for it, but my hand hesitated. What was I going to do? Call the police and tell them I heard a noise? It could be nothing. But the sound came again, and this time it was unmistakable. A slow, deliberate footstep, just outside my bedroom door. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. My house wasn't big. There was no way anyone could be inside without me noticing, unless they had been in here before I went to bed. My mind raced, running through every possible scenario. Maybe someone had slipped in while I was distracted. Maybe they had been waiting, watching me all night. I forced myself to move, creeping out of bed as quietly as I could. My bare feet touched the cold hardwood floor, and I tiptoed across the room, pressing my ear to the door. There it was, breathing, soft, shallow, and deliberate. My own breath caught in my throat. Someone was on the other side of the door. I backed away, heart pounding. My hand clutched my phone so tightly my knuckles ached as I dialed 911. The operator answered quickly, but I kept my voice low, whispering into the phone as I explained the situation. "There's someone in my house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're outside my bedroom door." The operator's calm voice was almost surreal. "Stay where you are, sir. Officers are on their way." I glanced at the door. "How long?" "Just a few minutes," she replied. I didn't have a few minutes. The door handle began to turn. I stared, my blood running cold as the knob rotated slowly, silently. The door creaked open, just a sliver at first, but it was enough to make my breath catch in my throat. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, tall and still, almost blending into the darkness. I couldn't make out his face, but the glint of metal in his hand told me all I needed to know. A knife. I couldn't move. My mind screamed at me to do something, run, hide, fight, but I was frozen. The figure just stood there, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in rhythm. He didn't rush me. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, waiting, like he was savoring the moment. I finally found my voice. What? The figure tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question, but didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step forward. That was enough to snap me out of my paralysis. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp from the nightstand, and hurled it at him. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing I could think of. The lamp hit him square in the chest with a dull thud, and he staggered back, but he didn't fall. Then, he laughed. A low, raspy chuckle that sent a wave of terror through me. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I bolted out of the bedroom, sprinting down the hallway toward the front door. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps, slow, deliberate, and unhurried, like he knew I couldn't escape. My hands fumbled with the lock, my fingers trembling as I tried to get the door open. I could feel him getting closer. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Finally, the lock clicked, and I flung the door open, practically throwing myself outside into the cold night air. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. My feet pounded the pavement as I ran down the street, not stopping until I saw the flashing lights of a police car in the distance. Relief washed over me as the car pulled up, and 2 officers jumped out, their guns drawn. I pointed frantically toward the house, my chest heaving as I tried to explain what had happened. "He's inside," I gasped. "He's in the house." The officers didn't hesitate. They rushed inside while I stood there, shaking, trying to catch my breath. Every nerve in my body was still on high alert, and the cold night air felt sharp against my skin, but I couldn't think straight. My mind was stuck on the image of that man, his grin, the malicious glint in his eyes. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I was frozen in that moment, replaying it over and over, wondering how close I had come to real danger. Minutes passed. I paced in the yard, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My heart was still racing, but the initial surge of adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me cold and shaky. I rubbed my arms, glancing at the officers as they moved from room to room inside my house, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. I half expected to hear shouts or the clattering sound of someone being caught, but nothing came, only silence. Finally, the front door creaked open, and one of the officers stepped out, his expression tight. He looked at me, then at his partner, as if he didn't quite know how to break the news. "There's no one in there," he said slowly, shaking his head. "We searched the whole house. It's empty." I blinked, my brain refusing to comprehend his words. What I stammered, "No, that's impossible. I saw him. He was in my kitchen. He chased me. I saw him." The officers exchanged glances, clearly thinking I was hysterical. The look in their eyes said it all. They didn't believe me. But I knew what I saw. That man had been inside my house. I could still feel his presence, like a lingering poison in the air. I stood frozen in my room, paralyzed by fear as slow, deliberate footsteps echoed in the hallway outside my door, confirming my worst nightmare. He was still here, lurking in the shadows, taunting me with his presence. My heart raced as I reached for my phone, desperate to call for help, but before I could dial, the door creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness. The air felt electric, charged with impending danger, and I was acutely aware that I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. The old village of Elder Grove had long been forgotten, swallowed by time and obscured by whispers of its haunted past. It was a place that the world outside had largely ignored, but to me, it was a siren call. I had always been drawn to the macabre, and the rumors of the witch who supposedly dwelled there tugged at my curiosity like an invisible thread. I parked my car at the end of a cracked, overgrown road leading into the village. As I stepped out, a chill settled over me, a creeping sense of unease that was difficult to shake. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dilapidated houses, their windows like hollow eyes watching my every move. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the rustle of branches seemed to whisper secrets long kept. I took my first steps into Elder Grove, the ground crunching beneath my boots, the sound echoing ominously in the silence. The village was a ghost of its former self, with remnants of homes collapsing under the weight of time. Each structure told a story, broken shutters swinging on rusted hinges, weeds overtaking the pathways, and the remnants of fences, splintered and warped, struggling to keep the memories of the past at bay. As I wandered deeper, a low moan of the wind curled through the streets, sounding eerily like a distant lament. I paused, straining to listen. Was it just the wind, or was there something more? Shadows flitted between the trees, and I could have sworn I saw movement in the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there was nothing, only the oppressive stillness. I ventured toward the village square, where an ancient well stood like a sentinel. Its stone walls were thick with moss, and the water inside reflected the sky, dark and unfathomable. I leaned over the edge, peering into the depths, and felt an unsettling sensation as if I were being watched from below. I quickly straightened, shaking my head to clear the strange feeling. The well was just a relic, a remnant of a time long gone. The village square itself was marked by a statue of a woman, long forgotten and worn by the elements. Her features were eroded, and a thick vine wrapped around her like a serpent, giving her an almost sinister appearance. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stared at her. The locals had likely known her well, perhaps they had once revered her. Now she stood as a silent guardian over a forsaken place, shrouded in mystery. As I continued my exploration, the sounds of the forest grew louder, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, and the distant caw of crows. Yet, woven within those natural sounds were other soft whispers that seemed to float on the air, barely audible, but undeniably present. I quickened my pace, feeling a pulse of anxiety thrum in my veins. I stumbled upon what remained of a small tavern, its door hanging off its hinges, creaking as it swung in the breeze. The interior was dark, littered with broken furniture and empty bottles. As I stepped inside, a cold draft rushed past me, sending a shiver through my body. I felt an overwhelming sense of desolation, as if the spirits of the past were trapped within these walls. Suddenly I heard a soft thump from above, as though something heavy had fallen. My heart raced as I turned to face the staircase that spiraled upward into darkness. I took a step back, hesitating, but my curiosity propelled me forward. I couldn't leave without knowing more about this place, this village cloaked in shadows and tales of a witch. I ascended the stairs, each creak of the wood echoing in the stillness. The air grew colder, thickening with a palpable tension that pressed against my skin. I reached the landing and found a narrow hallway lined with doors. Each one was closed, yet I could feel something emanating from behind them, an energy that was both enticing and terrifying. I pressed my ear against one of the doors, straining to hear, but there was only silence. I felt a pang of disappointment, but I couldn't let that deter me. I moved to the next door and pushed it open, revealing a room cloaked in shadows. Old furniture lay in disarray, and the walls were adorned with strange symbols. A chill swept over me as I entered, the air thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something acrid and bitter. I stepped cautiously inside, taking in the remnants of the room. A table sat in the center, cluttered with jars filled with dried herbs and dusty books with cracked spines. I felt a thrill at the thought that perhaps this had been a place of rituals, a sanctum for the witch rumored to inhabit the village. But the thrill was short-lived. A sudden crash echoed from below, and I jumped back, adrenaline flooding my system. I peered out into the hallway, the shadows seeming to dance and pulse with life. It was getting late, and the thought of being trapped in this house as darkness fell was enough to make my heart race. I retreated from the tavern, hurrying back outside. The twilight was deepening, and a thick fog began to roll in from the surrounding woods, enveloping the village in a ghostly embrace. I could barely see the outlines of the buildings as I navigated through the haze, the world around me transforming into an otherworldly landscape. My instincts pulled me toward the grandest house in Eldergrove, the one rumored to belong to the witch. It loomed at the end of the main street, a shadow among shadows. As I approached, I felt a chill in the air, a sense of foreboding that made my skin prickle. The house was more dilapidated than I had imagined, with ivy strangling its walls and the roof sagging under the weight of neglect. The door stood slightly ajar, creaking as it swayed in the wind. I hesitated at the threshold, a knot tightening in my stomach. But my curiosity won out. I had to see this place for myself. I stepped inside, the darkness swallowing me whole. The air was thick with dust and the scent of damp wood. My flashlight flickered as I made my way through the entryway, illuminating faded wallpaper peeling away from the walls and furniture draped in sheets that looked like ghosts in the dim light. As I moved deeper into the house, I felt a disconcerting stillness settle around me. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deafening in the silence. I passed through rooms filled with odd trinkets, jars of herbs, strange stones, and pages of parchment scattered across tables, as if someone had left in haste. Suddenly, I heard a soft, eerie sound like a distant whisper, barely discernible yet laden with a sense of urgency. I froze, heart racing. The air seemed to thicken, and the shadows around me deepened. The sense of being watched washed over me once more, heavy and suffocating. I turned to leave, but a flicker of movement caught my eye. My breath hitched in my throat as I saw a shadow flitting across the wall, a figure clothed in darkness. For a brief moment I thought I saw the outline of a woman, her cloak billowing around her like a living shadow. Then she was gone, swallowed by the gloom. I stumbled back, the air around me heavy with an indescribable energy. The shadows felt alive, pulsating with a presence that sent a jolt of fear through me. I darted for the door, the oppressive darkness clawing at my heels. I burst into the night, gasping for breath as I fled from the witch's house. The village of Eldergrove was transformed in the moonlight, its shadows stretching and shifting like living creatures. I raced toward my car, the sound of my pounding heart drowning out the whispers that seemed to follow me. As I reached the vehicle, I glanced back one last time, the witch's house looming behind me, a dark silhouette against the night sky. I threw myself into the car, slamming the door shut as if to shield myself from the malevolence I had encountered. The engine roared to life, and I sped away, the village receding into the distance. Yet, as I drove, the image of that shadow lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder of the witch who was said to dwell within the remnants of Eldergrove. I had come seeking a story, but what I found was something far darker than I could have ever imagined. Eldergrove was a place steeped in mystery, its shadows alive, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that the witch's shadow was still watching, lurking just beyond the veil of night, a reminder that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. I don't know why I agreed to take this trip. Maybe it was a desire to disconnect, to escape the pressure of city life. Maybe I just wanted to be alone, but not in the familiar way, sitting in my apartment surrounded by reminders of a life I wasn't sure I was happy with. A friend had suggested it, a cabin in the middle of nowhere. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just silence, complete isolation. The idea sounded appealing at first, but now that I was here, standing in front of the small wooden structure, I felt uneasy. It was late afternoon, and the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the ground. The forest surrounded the cabin like a wall, dense and dark, making it feel as if the outside world had disappeared the moment I stepped out of my car. The cabin was small, barely more than one room. There was a narrow porch with a single rocking chair, and the windows were covered with thin curtains that fluttered slightly in the breeze. The air smelled different here, a mix of pine and damp earth, clean but heavy. It felt thick in my lungs, almost too much to breathe. I unlocked the door, the old wood creaking as I stepped inside. The interior was as simple as I expected: a small bed with a worn quilt, a wood-burning stove, a table with a single chair, and a few shelves lined with dusty books and mismatched dishes. There was no electricity, just a few oil lamps scattered around the room. I set my bag down on the bed and took a deep breath. It was quiet, unnervingly quiet. No cars in the distance, no voices, no hum of electricity, just the wind whispering through the trees. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I explored the cabin, unpacked my things, and tried to settle into the idea of being alone in the wilderness. The sun dipped lower, and the shadows stretched farther, until the forest outside the windows became a solid wall of black. I lit one of the oil lamps, the warm glow filling the small space, casting flickering shadows on the walls. As night fell, the silence grew heavier. It wasn't peaceful, though. It felt thick, almost oppressive. I hadn't realized how much noise I was used to, even at night: the distant hum of traffic, the murmur of people outside my window. Here, there was nothing. Around midnight, I heard it. A faint sound, barely noticeable at first, like something tapping against the cabin. I froze, straining to hear. It came again, tap, 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 slow and deliberate. My first thought was a branch brushing against the side of the cabin, but the sound was too rhythmic, too intentional. I stood up, moving quietly to the window, and peeked through the curtain. The darkness outside was impenetrable, the forest a wall of shadow. I couldn't see anything, but the tapping continued, steady, like fingers drumming against the wood. I pulled the curtain back farther, my heart pounding. Nothing. Just the darkness pressing in. I forced myself to step away from the window, telling myself it was nothing. The wind, maybe, or an animal. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the sound, but it only grew louder, more insistent. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, the tapping seemed to get closer, more persistent. It wasn't coming from one spot anymore. It was all around, moving from wall to wall, like something was circling the cabin, searching for a way in. By 2 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and grabbed the oil lamp, holding it up as I walked toward the door. My hand hovered over the knob. Part of me wanted to open it, to confront whatever was out there, to prove to myself it was nothing. But I didn't. But instead, I locked it. The tapping stopped, just like that. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I stood there for a long moment, listening. My breath was shallow, my heart racing. Nothing moved outside. I went back to bed, telling myself I was imagining things. The isolation was playing tricks on my mind, making me hear things that weren't there. I lay down, trying to calm myself. But then, the floorboards creaked. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The sound was unmistakable, soft, deliberate footsteps coming from inside the cabin. My pulse thundered in my ears as I gripped the edge of the blanket, too terrified to move. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, like someone or something was walking carefully through the room. It was impossible. I was alone. I had checked the entire cabin earlier. There was no one else here. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps continued, moving closer to the bed. I forced myself to sit up, clutching the oil lamp. The flame flickered, casting long, wavering shadows across the room. My eyes scanned the space, but there was nothing. No one. Just the empty room, the small bed, the table. The footsteps stopped. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The silence stretched out, thick and unbearable. I sat there, clutching the lamp, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. After what felt like hours, I finally lay back down, too exhausted to keep sitting up. The silence returned, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. Eventually, I drifted off, though my sleep was fitful and plagued with strange, half-formed dreams of shadows moving through the cabin. When I woke up, the sun was just starting to rise, casting pale light through the windows. I sat up, my heart still racing from the night before. The cabin was quiet, just as it had been when I arrived. I tried to shake off the lingering fear, telling myself it had been nothing more than my mind playing tricks on me. But when I stood up, I noticed something. The front door was open. Not just unlocked wide open, as if someone had pushed it open and walked out into the morning light. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it, my mind racing. I had locked it. I was sure I had locked it, but there it was, swinging gently on its hinges. I took a step toward the door, my hands trembling. The ground outside was soft from the morning dew, and as I stepped onto the porch, I saw them footprints. Large, heavy, unmistakably human footprints, leading away from the cabin and disappearing into the trees. I stared at them for a long time, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing, because the footprints weren't mine. I stood frozen at the threshold, my heart thudding in my chest as my eyes traced the muddy footprints leading into the forest. They were clear and deliberate, each step pressed deeply into the damp earth. Whoever had left them must have been standing right outside the cabin, close enough to hear my every breath during the night. The footprints were unnerving, large and heavy, almost too large to belong to a regular person. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stared at the tracks, each one leading deeper into the thick woods that surrounded the cabin. The trees loomed tall and close, their gnarled branches twisting together like skeletal hands, forming a canopy that blocked out most of the early morning light. The darkness beneath them felt suffocating, like an entity in its own right. I stepped back into the cabin, slamming the door shut behind me and turning the lock again, though I knew now that it didn't offer any real protection. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had happened. I had locked the door before bed. I knew I had. So how had it opened in the night? And who or what had been inside with me? The cabin, which had once seemed like a quaint retreat, now felt like a cage. The walls seemed to close in around me, thick with the weight of the previous night's events. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, every shift in the wind outside sent my nerves on edge. My thoughts darted back to the footsteps I had heard during the night, moving slowly around the cabin, growing closer and closer. They hadn't been a dream. They had been real. I tried to tell myself that it must have been an animal, something large like a bear, maybe. But I knew that wasn't true. The footsteps had been too deliberate, too human, and the footprints outside, they were definitely not left by any animal. The door creaked wider, revealing the same yawning darkness that had haunted me since my arrival. I felt a chill wash over me, and panic surged as I scrambled to my feet, instinct telling me to run. But before I could move, I heard a whisper soft and sinister, wrapping around me like a cold hand. Stay it beckoned, and I felt rooted to the porch, paralyzed by fear. In an instant, I turned and fled into the woods, plunging into the underbrush and leaving the cabin behind. The tapping faded into the distance, but the feeling of being hunted remained, a chilling reminder that the isolation I had sought had only revealed the lurking shadows waiting for me to let my guard down. It was a sweltering summer afternoon when I found myself on a road that seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon, flanked by flat, barren fields that whispered secrets of decay. I had taken a wrong turn somewhere near a forgotten town, and my phone had surrendered to the relentless desertion of signal. With each mile, the landscape morphed into a surreal painting of desolation. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, and the sun hung in the sky like a judgmental eye, glaring down at me. I pulled into a small diner, a rusted sign creaking overhead. Proclaiming it as Mabel's Place, it was a rundown establishment, the paint peeling off the walls, and the neon lights flickering with a ghostly glow. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a couple of rusty pickup trucks and a solitary sedan. I stepped inside, the door swinging open with a jarring squeal, and was greeted by the smell of grease and something more acrid lurking beneath it. The atmosphere was thick, like time had congealed here, and the dim light cast long shadows across the faded linoleum floor. The diner was nearly empty, with just a few patrons scattered at the far booths, their faces obscured by the dim lighting. The waitress, an older woman with deep lines etched into her sun-weathered face, eyed me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion as I settled into a booth near the back. I glanced around, noticing the worn-out jukebox in the corner, its once vibrant colors now muted and peeling. It stood there, silent, like it had been forgotten along with everything else in this forsaken place. After a few minutes of waiting, the waitress approached, setting down a glass of water before me. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice grating against the stillness. I ordered a burger, wanting something to fill the gnawing emptiness in my stomach. As I waited, I could feel the weight of the other patrons' stares. A man in a faded baseball cap sat at the counter, his gaze flicking to me every now and then. I tried to ignore the prickling sensation creeping up my spine and focused on the cracked vinyl menu in front of me. The food arrived and I dug in, the burger surprisingly decent despite the unsettling ambience, Just as I was about to take another bite, the door swung open with a bang, rattling the framed pictures on the walls. In walked a couple, their laughter echoing off the walls, slicing through the oppressive atmosphere. They were young, full of life, a stark contrast to the rest of us. They sat at the booth across from mine, oblivious to the tension that had settled in the diner. I couldn't help but listen in as they bantered, their voices bright and carefree. But the older patrons shifted in their seats, their eyes narrowing with an unsettling intensity. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I forced myself to focus on my meal, trying to drown out the growing sense of discomfort. Then it happened. The couple's laughter ceased abruptly, and the man turned to look at the waitress, his expression shifting from joy to confusion. "What's wrong with everyone?" he asked, laughter still lingering in his tone but fading fast. The waitress's gaze hardened. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low and strained. "It's not safe." The couple exchanged glances, the playfulness evaporating from their demeanor. "What do you mean?" the woman asked, her voice suddenly tense. "You should leave," the waitress insisted, her eyes darting to the patrons around us. "It's best if you just go." But instead of leaving, the couple laughed it off. "Oh, come on, it's just a diner," the man said, his bravado faltering as he caught the wary expressions of the older customers. I felt the atmosphere shift, a tangible tension tightening around us like a noose. The couple's laughter faded as they glanced at each other, uncertainty flickering across their faces. They got up to leave, and in that moment, I felt an inexplicable urge to join them. I wanted to escape the suffocating air of Mabel's place, but I was frozen in place, rooted to my seat. Just as they stepped outside, the man suddenly stopped, his face twisting in confusion. "What's that?" he muttered, pointing at something in the distance. The woman squinted, leaning forward as if trying to discern what he was seeing. The patrons turned their heads, the dread palpable. I leaned closer to the window, my heart racing, and squinted into the blinding light. In the distance, I could see a figure moving slowly, almost imperceptibly. It was just a dark spot against the shimmering heat waves, but something about its movements sent a jolt of fear through me. Then it stopped. It stopped. The couple stood transfixed, their expressions shifting from curiosity to horror. The man took a step back, his laughter long gone, replaced by a look of sheer panic. I wanted to scream for them to get back inside, but the words died in my throat. And then, without warning, the figure darted forward faster than I could comprehend. It was a blur, a shadow rushing toward them, and the couple turned to run, panic overtaking them. They sprinted back to the door, but the diner seemed to close in around us. The door was ajar, swinging wildly, and the waitress shouted something I couldn't hear over the pounding of my heart. I was still sitting at the booth, paralyzed as the couple rushed in, slamming the door behind them. The waitress's face had gone pale, and the patrons were all staring at the door, breaths held, like we were all part of a grotesque tableau. The couple was breathing hard, their eyes wide with fear, and for a brief moment, I felt a spark of hope they had made it back inside. But the room fell eerily silent, and I could feel the weight of all those gazes upon us, as if we were all trapped in some sinister game. The man, visibly shaken, turned to the others. What the hell was that? But no one responded. The waitress's eyes darted toward the door, and a creeping dread slithered through the air. Without warning, the power flickered and then went out, plunging the diner into darkness. A few seconds later, the emergency lights flickered on, casting a sickly yellow glow over the room. In that half-light, the faces of the patrons contorted into masks of fear and unease. The couple huddled close together, whispering frantically, but I could barely hear them over the pounding of my heart. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I felt rooted to the spot, unable to move. I could sense something was terribly wrong, and as the lights continued to flicker, it felt like time had begun to stretch. In the silence, we all waiting for something to happen, waiting for that shadow to crash through the door. I could feel my breath quickening, panic rising within me, and I glanced around the diner, searching for any sign of safety. But the oppressive air was thick with dread, and the patrons began shifting uneasily in their seats. Just then, a loud bang echoed outside, like thunder rumbling across the sky. The couple screamed, and the waitress rushed to the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. "Stay here," she yelled, pushing against the door as though trying to keep something at bay. But the door swung open with a sudden rush, and in that moment, chaos erupted. The couple bolted toward the kitchen, screaming, but the patrons remained rooted to their seats, their faces blank, as if they were part of a macabre play. I found my voice, shouting for the waitress, for anyone to do something, but the words felt meaningless. The shadow darted past the door, and then I saw it, a twisted, elongated figure with hollow eyes and a grin that stretched too wide, a mockery of a human face. It lurked in the distance, lurking just out of reach, watching, waiting. Then the lights flickered once more, and I took a step back, my heart racing, fear clenching around me like a vice. The figure vanished into the night, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. The waitress stumbled back, and with one last terrified glance at the door, she slammed it shut, locking it. But the terror hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The diners were all still, eyes glazed over, and for a brief moment, I felt as if I had stepped into a nightmare. I had to leave. I had to get out of there. As I stood to leave, the power flickered back on, and the jukebox played a haunting tune while the patrons stirred, their eyes vacant and hungry, revealing the diner as a trap spun from desperation. One last glance at the frozen couple filled me with despair, and I ran outside, feeling a shadow chase me as I sped away. Mabel's place faded into the distance, but that feeling of being watched lingered, and I could have sworn I heard laughter echoing in the night, a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. I never thought I'd end up here, stranded in a dilapidated motel in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless fields and the scent of decay. It was supposed to be a quick stop on my road trip, just a place to rest for the night. But as I stood at the reception desk, a chill ran down my spine. The clerk, an elderly man with deep-set eyes and a grin that stretched just a bit too wide, was the first sign that something was off. "Just you?" he asked, his voice raspy, like gravel scraping against metal. I nodded, uneasy under his gaze. "Room 7. First floor, near the back." "Nice view of the fields," he said, handing me a rusty key. I could only muster a weak smile in return. As I made my way to my room, I noticed how the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting erratic shadows on the cracked linoleum. The air was stale, thick with a musty odor that seemed to cling to the walls. I reached my room and pushed the door open, wincing at the creak it made. Inside, the room was sparse, a double bed with stained sheets, a small table with a cracked mirror, and a TV that looked like it hadn't been turned on in years. I tossed my bag onto the bed and decided to take a shower to wash off the grime of the road. The water sputtered before finally coming out in a trickle, the temperature fluctuating between scalding hot and icy cold. As I stood there, eyes closed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Once I dried off, I put on some comfortable clothes and sat on the bed, scrolling through my phone for something to distract myself. The signal was weak, so I turned off the screen and glanced at the room. It felt as though the walls were closing in, and I had this growing sense of dread. With no other option, I decided to venture outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, and the field behind the motel swayed gently in the breeze. I wandered, my feet crunching on the dry grass, until I stumbled upon an old barn. Its door hung ajar, creaking ominously as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Shadows danced in the corners, and the scent of rust and old hay filled my nostrils. I took a step further in, my curiosity piqued. On the far wall, I noticed strange markings, scratches carved into the wood, forming patterns that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I reached out to touch them, but something moved in the corner of my eye. I spun around, heart racing, but found nothing. Shaking off the unease, I took a few more steps, but the barn was eerily silent. Then, I heard a soft whisper, barely discernible, like the rustle of leaves. Help me, it was faint but unmistakable. I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. Hello, I called out, my voice trembling. Silence answered. The urge to flee was strong, but something compelled me to stay. I stepped further in, searching for the source of the voice. Suddenly, the floor creaked beneath me, and I stumbled, catching myself just in time. My heart raced as I glanced around, the whisper echoing in my mind. I had to get out of there. I turned and rushed back toward the exit, but as I reached the door, it slammed shut. Panic surged through me, and I pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out," I shouted, my voice breaking. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Help me." My pulse quickened, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, my breath hitching in my throat. The shadows in the barn seemed to shift, coalescing into a figure that was indistinct but undeniably there. I could see the outline of a face, twisted in pain, its mouth moving but not producing any sound. I was frozen in fear, rooted to the spot. The figure seemed to reach out, its hands stretching toward me. I finally found my voice. "What do you want?" I croaked. "Help me," it repeated, the whisper echoing in my ears. I stumbled back against the door, heart racing, desperate to escape this nightmare. But I had to know. How, I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the barn's walls began to close in, and the figure surged toward me, dissolving into shadows that wrapped around my ankles. I felt them pulling me down, the cold grip wrapping tighter as I struggled to break free. The last thing I saw was the figure's anguished face, its eyes pleading. In a moment of adrenaline, I pushed against the door with all my strength, and it swung open, flinging me into the night air. I stumbled out and collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, the cool night air a stark contrast to the oppressive heat inside the barn. I didn't stop to look back. I ran toward my room, heart pounding in my chest. The motel loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the starless sky. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me and locking it tight. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath, mind racing. But the peace was short-lived. The whisper returned, louder now, pounding against my skull. "Help me." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my palms against my ears, but it didn't help. The sound enveloped me, drowning out my thoughts. I opened my eyes and the room seemed to shimmer, the shadows deepening, stretching toward me like dark tendrils. In a desperate bid, I grabbed my phone, hoping to find some sort of signal. The screen flickered, then went dark. I cursed under my breath and tossed it aside, feeling utterly alone. The whisper transformed into a scream, filling the room with a cacophony of terror. "Help me," it was a plea. And suddenly I understood. The figure wasn't just a specter, it was trapped, just like me. The shadows twisted and formed a doorway, beckoning me to step through. I hesitated, fear clashing with the need to help whoever or whatever was trapped inside. But as the whispers crescendoed, I felt a surge of primal fear. I grabbed my bag and threw open the door. My heart raced as I dashed through the narrow hallway, the oppressive air pressing down on me. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, casting frantic shadows that danced along the walls. The whispers followed me, filling my mind with despair and urgency, urging me to return, to save the lost souls within. I reached the exit, fumbling with the handle. The door creaked open, and I burst into the night, gasping for fresh air. I didn't stop to look back, feeling the weight of the motel's darkness behind me. My car was parked a short distance away, and I sprinted toward it, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The gravel crunched beneath my feet, and I could feel the whispers clawing at my back, trying to pull me into the shadows. I reached my car, yanked open the door, and jumped inside. My hands trembled as I fumbled for the keys, finally managing to start the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness as I sped away, the motel fading into the distance. The whispers dulled to a faint echo, but I knew they were still there, lingering like a shadow in my mind. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, half expecting to see a figure standing in the parking lot, but it was empty, just the endless expanse of darkness. As I drove away, the oppressive weight lifted from my shoulders, but a lingering dread settled in my mind like a thick fog. Each mile I put between myself and that cursed motel brought bittersweet relief, yet the echoes of anguished whispers haunted me. The images of trapped souls and their desperate cries etched themselves into my memory, making it impossible to forget. I clenched the steering wheel, resolute in my decision never to return, even as a part of me felt the dark pull of that place, beckoning me to confront the horrors I had narrowly escaped. Days turned into weeks, and although I tried to fill my life with normalcy, the unease never truly left me. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see a familiar figure standing just beyond the reach of my headlights. At night, the shadows in my room seemed to shift and breathe, igniting a primal fear that kept me from sleeping. The whispers had woven themselves into the fabric of my existence, a reminder of the lives forever entwined with that wretched motel. I often questioned my resolve, wondering if I had made the right choice by fleeing instead of seeking to help those who remained trapped. But deep down, I knew some shadows were meant to stay hidden, their darkness too deep for the light of day. And so, I moved through life, always aware that I carried a piece of that night within me, a reminder of the thin line that separates freedom from the abyss. I shouldn't have taken the detour. I knew at the moment I turned off the main highway and onto this godforsaken stretch of road. The GPS promised me it'd save an hour, maybe more, and I had been in a hurry to get to the hotel before midnight. A long drive, a peaceful night's sleep, and then the last leg of the journey. That was the plan. But that plan had gone to hell. It's been hours since I turned off, and I haven't seen a single sign of life. No cars, no houses, not even a flickering light in the distance. Just the same unchanging road, the same cracked asphalt under my tires, the same dull, lifeless terrain stretching out in every direction, disappearing into the black horizon. At first, I thought it was just the isolation messing with me. I'd been driving for so long, alone, without so much as a mile marker to track my progress. But then the GPS lost signal, the phone switched to no service, and the world outside my car went eerily still. It's not that it was quiet, there's always the hum of the engine and the hiss of the tires on the road, but there's something wrong about this silence. It presses against my skull, thick and smothering. The road doesn't even seem to curve. No matter how long I drive, it just stretches out like a straight line that goes on forever. No signs, no exits, and now no sense of time. I check the dashboard clock, and it's frozen, midnight. But I know it's been at least an hour since I last checked. Something's off, and I don't know how to fix it. My mind is racing, thinking of all the logical explanations. Maybe I missed a turn. Maybe I'm just overtired and my mind's playing tricks on me. But when I glance at the fuel gauge, my stomach knots. I should have used more gas by now. I've been driving for hours, but the needle hasn't moved. I tighten my grip on the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Maybe I just need to focus, concentrate. Maybe this is all just in my head, and if I keep going, I'll reach somewhere, anywhere. That makes sense. That's when I see the figure. I blink, hard, because I'm sure it's just my mind playing tricks again. But no. Up ahead, standing right on the edge of the road, there's a figure. Tall, motionless, silhouetted against the black night. There's nothing else around, no car or sign or building, just this person standing alone. I slow down instinctively, the car's headlights washing over them. As I get closer, I see it's a man. Or at least I think it is. He's facing away from me, his back to the road, hands hanging loosely at his sides. His clothes are odd. They're dark, but the style feels old, outdated like something from another time. A long coat, heavy boots, a wide-brimmed hat. I can't make out much else in the dim light, but something about him makes my skin crawl. I don't stop. I don't even slow down as much as I want to. I just keep driving, eyes locked on the rearview mirror once I pass him. He doesn't move. He just stands there, as though he was placed there like a forgotten statue on the side of the road. My heart is racing, my fingers white-knuckled around the steering wheel. I tell myself not to look back again, but I can't help it. The rearview mirror shows nothing. He's gone. I press my foot harder on the gas, my car speeding up, but the road remains the same, endless and dark. The clock still reads midnight. Then I see another figure. This time, it's a woman. She's standing in the same way just off the side of the road, facing away, arms hanging at her sides. Same dark clothes, same eerie stillness. I pass her too, my hands trembling now. I don't look back. I don't want to know if she's still there or not. What the hell is happening? I glance at my phone again, though I know it's pointless. No signal. The map is frozen on the last bit of road it captured before the world seemed to fall away. I toss the phone onto the passenger seat in frustration. That's when the thumping starts. It's faint at first, like a muffled beat. It comes from somewhere under the car, or maybe inside it. A rhythmic thud, thud, thud that grows louder with each passing minute. My heart pounds in sync with it, my mind scrambling to figure out what it is. A flat tire? Something caught under the car? I pull over, the car shuddering to a stop. The thumping doesn't stop. It's louder now, pulsing through the floor of the car, vibrating up into my chest. I don't want to get out. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to stay in the car, to lock the doors and keep driving, but I can't ignore it. I need to see what's making that sound. I grab the flashlight from the glove compartment, the beam of light shaky as I step out into the cold night air. It's even quieter out here, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I can hear my own breathing, too loud, too fast. The thumping continues, steady and relentless. I walk around the car, shining the light on the tires. They're fine. I crouch down, peering under the vehicle. There's nothing there. No branch caught in the wheel well, no visible damage. Just empty road stretching out behind me and in front of me. I stand up, my breath coming in sharp gasps now. The thumping hasn't stopped. If anything, it's louder. It's not coming from the car. It's coming from inside the trunk. My hand trembles as I reach for the trunk's release lever. My mind is racing with every terrible possibility. Maybe someone's in there. Maybe something got in there when I wasn't looking. But that's insane. I've been driving this whole time. There's no way. The trunk pops open with a metallic creak, and I shine the flashlight inside. It's empty. The thumping stops. I slam the trunk shut and sprint back to the driver's seat, slamming the door behind me, locking it, and jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roars to life and I floor the gas pedal, tires squealing as I race down the road. The clock still says midnight. The road is still straight, still endless, still the same. And then, in the distance, I see more figures. Dozens of them. standing on both sides of the road, evenly spaced like gravestones in a forgotten cemetery, all facing away from me, all perfectly still. I speed up, heart in my throat, hands shaking on the wheel. They blur past me, one by one, too fast for me to make out any details, but I know they're all the same. Every figure, every motionless silhouette, waiting, watching, though I can't see their faces. I drive for what feels like hours. The road never ends. The clock never changes. Midnight forever. That's when I see the gas station. I almost miss it because it appears so suddenly on the side of the road. The bright neon sign flickers weakly, casting an eerie glow over the empty parking lot. It's old, like something from the 70s, with a single rusty pump and a grimy windowed building that looks like it hasn't been maintained in decades. I should keep driving. Every instinct tells me to stay away, but the gas gauge finally drops a fraction, and the realization hits me like a punch to the gut I'm running low on fuel. I pull into the parking lot, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, and roll up to the pump. My hand shakes as I turn off the engine and step out of the car, the night air heavy and cold around me. The pump is ancient, the kind you have to turn on manually, and I fumble with it, trying to figure out how it works. There's a small bell on the door of the building, and I hear it jingle faintly as I glance inside. The lights are dim, casting long shadows across the floor. Behind the counter, a man sits slumped over, his back to me, motionless. I hesitate, but I need gas. I approach the door, my fingers brushing the cold handle, and push it open. The bell jingles again, louder this time, echoing in the empty room. "Hello," I call out, my voice sounding thin and nervous in the still air. The man doesn't respond. I step inside, the door swinging shut behind me with a soft click. The air in the building smells stale, like dust and old oil. There are shelves filled with outdated snacks and magazines, all of them coated in a fine layer of grime. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, flickering slightly. "Excuse me," I take a step closer to the counter, but the man doesn't move. Something about the way he's sitting sends a chill down my spine. I swallow hard and inch closer, the sound of my footsteps too loud in the quiet room. Then I see it. The pool of dark liquid spreading slowly across the floor from beneath his chair. My breath catches in my throat, and I stumble back, my heart pounding in my chest. It's thick, almost black in the dim light. I don't need to get closer to know what it is. I turn to leave. I don't think. I just run.
The towering pyramid of Khufu rose before me, its massive silhouette cutting through the night sky. The air was thick with the weight of history and the many legends that surrounded this ancient marvel. Stories of curses, hidden chambers, and forgotten treasures whispered in the back of my mind, causing my heart to beat faster. As an archaeologist, I had spent years seeking out remnants of the past, yet a deep, unsettling feeling tugged at me tonight. Ahead lay the entrance, a yawning black opening that seemed to beckon me inside. I paused for a moment, glancing up at the sky, now void of the moon's light, swallowed by the darkness. My flashlight flickered briefly as I moved forward, pushing open the heavy stone door. It groaned in protest, the sound echoing through the stillness. Once inside, the air felt dense and stale, tinged with the musty smell of ancient earth and time-worn decay. Dust floated lazily in the narrow beam of light as I ventured deeper into the pyramid's labyrinthine passageways. The corridor wound like a snake, twisting and turning, drawing me further into the ancient structure's depths. The walls, covered in intricate hieroglyphs, whispered stories of a forgotten time. Each step felt like walking back through centuries. Though I had studied these markings countless times before, seeing them here, in this sacred place, filled me with awe. With every photo I took, Documenting my progress, my growing excitement slowly began to push aside the unease I had felt. The thrill of discovery outweighed any lingering fear. Then, an unsettling silence enveloped me. It was broken by the faintest of whispers, echoing off the stone walls. I paused, straining to hear, my heart racing. They sounded like a forgotten language, a chorus of voices layered with sadness and desperation. Chills crept down my spine, and I desperately tried to understand. But the words eluded me, slipping away like sand through my fingers. Still, my curiosity urged me forward. I followed the whispers down a narrow passageway that opened into a vast chamber. The sight took my breath away. The room was dimly lit by a phosphorescent glow emanating from the walls, illuminating hieroglyphics that seemed to pulse with life. In the center stood a stone altar, draped in tattered linen, remnants of rituals long forgotten. As I stepped closer, the whispers grew louder, transforming into an overwhelming cacophony. They swirled around me, echoing my thoughts and twisting my fears. Panic gnawed at my insides, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from the altar. Overwhelmed by terror, I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering as the darkness threatened to consume me. The whispers escalated into frantic shouts, urging me to flee. "You do not belong here," they screamed. As I turned to run, something caught my eye, a shadow moving across the far wall of the chamber. I froze, breath hitching in my throat. The shadow twisted and morphed, taking the shape of a tall figure draped in tattered linen, resembling the pharaohs depicted in the hieroglyphs. My heart pounded in my chest as the figure stepped into the glow of the chamber. The figure's face was shrouded in darkness, but I could feel its gaze piercing through the veil. A low growl emanated from it, vibrating in my bones. It raised a skeletal hand, and I could see the remnants of ancient jewelry glinting dimly in the eerie light. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a tempest. "Leave this place," the figure intoned, its voice echoing like thunder, resonating deep within me. I felt an overwhelming urge to obey, yet I was paralyzed by fear. Then, without warning, the chamber trembled as if the very stones were alive. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, and the walls seemed to close in. The pharaoh's figure lunged forward, and I snapped back into reality. My instincts kicked in, and I turned to flee, my flashlight flickering erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced along the walls. The whispers turned into anguished wails, the spirits crying out in sorrow and rage. "You disturb our rest," they lamented. I stumbled over the uneven stones, the echo of their voices following me like a pack of wolves, hungry and relentless. I sprinted down the passage, shadows clawing at my back as I raced toward the distant light of the entrance. Just as darkness seemed ready to swallow me, I burst through the door, collapsing into the cool night air. The pyramid loomed behind me, silent, as the whispers faded into the wind. Even as I walked back to camp, those whispers lingered in my mind. I knew then I would never return. Some secrets, I realized, were too dark to uncover. The beachside resort came into view just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, bathing the world in a spectacular blend of orange, pink, and lavender. The timing was perfect, golden hour transforming the sky into a canvas of soft, dreamy colors. It was a serene scene, with the fading light reflecting off the ocean's surface and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of salt and warmth. As the resort stood quietly against this picturesque backdrop, the peaceful atmosphere promised a much-needed escape from the rush of everyday life. As we checked in and were shown to our private cabin, I couldn't help but marvel at how perfect everything felt. The cabin, perched just a short walk from the beach, was small but cozy, with rustic wooden interiors and large windows that let in the glow of the fading daylight. After unpacking, my boyfriend suggested we take a walk along the shore before it got too dark. I readily agreed, eager to feel the sand between my toes and immerse myself in the peacefulness that seemed to hang in the air. The beach was nearly deserted, just a few other couples and families scattered along the shoreline. As we strolled barefoot, the sand was soft and cool underfoot, and the gentle lapping of the waves provided a calming rhythm. The ocean stretched out in front of us, vast and endless, reflecting the last slivers of daylight as the sun dipped lower on the horizon. A soft breeze played with my hair, and for a moment, I was completely at peace. The worries of the city, the noise, the stress, the constant movement seemed a world away. But as the sun sank lower and the sky transitioned from golden to a dusky blue, a strange sense of unease crept in. At first, I tried to brush it off as nothing. The vastness of the ocean, the isolation of the beach, the quiet, it was all so different from the life I was used to. Maybe that was all, it was the strangeness of the unfamiliar. But the longer we walked, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The sky darkened, the warm colors fading into cooler, deeper shades of purple and gray, and the shadows around us seemed to stretch longer, making the beach feel emptier, more desolate. I glanced at my boyfriend, wondering if he felt it too, but he seemed completely at ease, lost in the serenity of the moment. I was about to say something when a faint sound drifted through the air, a low, distant hum. It was barely audible, almost blending in with the sound of the waves, but it was there. Constant, steady. I stopped walking and tilted my head, straining to hear it better. "Did you hear that?" I asked. My boyfriend paused, listening for a moment before shrugging. "Probably just the wind or the waves. Nothing to worry about." I nodded, trying to convince myself that he was right, but the sound lingered in the back of my mind as we made our way back to the cabin. The walk that had felt so peaceful moments ago now seemed eerie, the once welcoming beach now feeling vast and empty, as if something unseen was watching us from the shadows. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something standing in the distance, though there was nothing there. Back inside the cabin, the cozy warmth of the space enveloped us, and the unease I'd felt began to fade. We made dinner, the soft glow of the lamps and the gentle crackle of the fireplace creating a sense of comfort and safety. By the time we sat down to eat, I had almost forgotten about the strange hum from the beach. We spent the rest of the evening chatting, playing cards, and enjoying the quiet isolation the resort offered. It was exactly the escape we'd been looking for, far from the chaos of the city. But later that night, long after we had fallen asleep, I woke up suddenly. The cabin was dark, save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. At first, I wasn't sure what had woken me, but then I heard it again, the hum. Only this time, it was louder, clearer, and unmistakable. It wasn't the wind or the waves. It was coming from the forest behind the resort, the same rhythmic, low drone I had heard earlier, but now it seemed closer, more insistent. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound filled the room, a steady vibration that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I glanced at my boyfriend, still asleep beside me, blissfully unaware of the strange noise. For a moment, I debated waking him, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the fear that if I acknowledged the sound, if I gave it any more attention, it would become real, something more than just a strange noise in the night. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was nothing, that it was just the unfamiliar surroundings playing tricks on my mind. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was something out there, beyond the beach, in the dark woods behind the resort.